The Locked On Podcast Network presents the Big 6 in 60. The 6 biggest national sports stories from the local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Get the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 60 minutes. The Big 6 in 60 starts now with the biggest story in sports.
The Oklahoma City Thunder getting a big win.
You are Locked On Thunder, your daily Oklahoma City Thunder podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
The Thunder beating the Celtics, getting a season series sweep, winning in the Garden through adversity. SGA and his MVP case gets stronger, and the Thunder showed you why they should be respected. This was a game, first and foremost, between two titans of the sport, between two of the best in the NBA, and a series that should happen in June. I mean, these two teams should take care of business. Hopefully they do and get to the finals, because we would all benefit from it as just basketball fans, because the pure hoops that was on display in this game were fun to watch, and the back and forths were fun to watch. The individual chess matches of this game were fun to watch. And this is a kind of series that would be an instant classic. I think that would captivate an audience. And I think that would be good for a sport that's right now really dragged through the mud at times with the national discourse. All that out of the way to say the Thunder got a big win. And we've called almost everyone, it feels like, their most impressive win, because there's been impressive elements of all these wins for the most part in this Thunder season. I don't think it's their best win. I think that Cleveland win at home, with all that they went through to get that one, was huge. I think that this first Celtics win was huge. But man, to go on the road into the Garden and get this win, it just showed a level of maturity and a level of resolve to bounce back from that Denver loss Monday, down J-Dub, down Caruso, and get a win over a reigning champion Celtics squad. And the Thunder saw SGA play like the MVP in terms of his floor game, in terms of his leadership and his scoring ability. 34 points on 55% shooting, 2 for 7 from 3, 10 for 11 at the free throw line, 5 rebounds, 7 assists, and a steal. I thought that the Celtics defended Shea better than anyone has all season long. I mean, they sent doubles at the right time. They were able to strip him. They forced him into 5 turnovers, which is unbelievably uncharacteristic. And yet still, right, with giving Boston all of the credit in the world for throwing the kitchen sink at Shea, making life tough on Shea, and making Shea uncomfortable throughout possessions. And that's something that not a lot of teams can do, but Boston can. And the end result is still 34 points on 55% shooting in 38 minutes of work, 39 technically. So that right there tells you what you need to know. This game had a playoff level feel for both sides in terms of defensive intensity. It had a playoff level feel from both sides in terms of the coaching staffs making adjustments in game, playing their guys 39, 40 minutes like you do in the playoffs. I mean, Shea played 39 minutes. Lou Dort played 39 minutes. And you look at the other side, and Jaylen Brown fouled out at 38 minutes. Jason Tatum played 41 minutes. Al Horford played 35 minutes, 34 minutes. Derek White played 38 minutes. Like you look at these two teams, and they really shrunk the rotations and went and played ball. They went after it. And the better team tonight won. I think that the series would go 7 games between these two squads. And at that point, it's just a toss-up of who would actually win a series between these two, if we are so lucky to get that NBA Finals matchup as basketball fans. But Shea did an excellent job. But I thought the story of the game was Chet Holmgren. Chet Holmgren had 23 points, 15 rebounds, 2 assists, and a block. He got to the free throw line 7 times, and he got there by being aggressive off the catch, by getting downhill and getting toward the basket and forcing the issue with the officials to get to the line. He only went 4 for 7, and he's only been like a mid-70s free throw shooter this season. I think he's a better free throw shooter than that. I think he has to become a better free throw shooter than that consistently. But that was even an issue pre-hip injuries. Like that one, I don't even want to chalk up to the hip fracture, because even during that amazing stretch in the first 10 games where he looked like an all-star, that was just one hole of his game during that stretch. So the free throw stuff is interesting from him and J-Dub, because whenever they do get to the line, sometimes they leave a lot to be desired at the charity stripe. But nonetheless, to even get there showed a level of athleticism, a level of force that we've seen flashes of from Chet, but have seen the most from him on Sunday and on this game here Wednesday against Boston. And so you've seen him round into form. He shot 57% from the floor on 14 attempts. The double big lineups worked really well. We'll talk about that coming up. But for Chet, in a game that you had to have it, you had to have him step up. And that's a lot to ask of him. And I'm here to be the first one to tell you that if he didn't step up, we would be sitting here saying, well, he broke his hip. He broke his hip. And that's true. And he has that out because it's true, because it's unthinkable to put this much on him so quickly after that hip fracture. And yet he delivered. And he delivered on Sunday, even through foul trouble. When he did get to play on the floor, those spinning to the lane finishes, including that dunk into a timeout, attacking Jamal Murray off the catch at the top of the key, all that stuff was reminiscent of what you saw from Chet earlier this year, what you saw from Chet in his rookie season. And you're slowly seeing him build back to that guy. And he has 16 more games to continue to round into form for this Thunder team. But in a night where you had to have him step up, he did. And some players are like that. Some players rise to the occasion. And I truly believe Chet Holmgren is one of those players. And he rose to the occasion tonight. The Thunder still have a very tough road ahead this week. But for tonight, Chet Holmgren was awesome in his minutes along with SGA. But the 1-2 punch of Shea, Chet got the job done. The 1-2 punch of Shea, J-Dub in January against Boston got the job done. And at some point, you're going to have to respect this team. They're 54-12. Every metric tells you that they are a title contender. The only metric missing is a ring, and they can't win a ring in March. They can't win a ring until June. And look, a lot of this, you're just going to have to deal with. As a Thunder fan listening to this show, you're going to have to deal with. Because they question Boston too. They question Denver too. They question the Warriors too. Then they win and we forget all that and just crown them as the next dynasty. It's all about playing the results. But last year's team who lost in the second round is not this year's team. This is a completely different team. And you can either believe your eyes and believe what's in front of you, or you can believe that magically, come May, Josh Giddey's back on the team, Hartenstein's off the team, and they're going to resort right back to what doomed them in the playoffs a year ago. This team is so different that we don't know what this team is. The bank on them being a postseason failure because of what happened last year is just ludicrous. Especially when the constant is, like of all these changes, the constant is they still have Shea, who was excellent, who averaged 32 points, over 32 points in that series against Dallas. So it's not as though you're hoping that like Shea bounces back as a option, right? As a playoff guy. He was awesome in the playoffs. It wasn't his fault that the Thunder lost. He was the reason why they took it to 6 games. But games like tonight continue to build their resume, continue to stress test them. This was a great job by the Thunder, top to bottom, to take this challenge head on and to get a win. And there were all these little details, including the double big lineups, including SGA fighting through a great defense. Cason Wallace deserves a ton of credit. Isaiah Hartenstein was big off the bench. I mean, the Thunder didn't start 2 bigs. They worked them in during the game, but they started out with Cason and Wiggins in that starting 5. And Wiggins had his worst game of the season where, he went 0 for 9. Defensively, he's just not very good at scaling up defensively, positionally, and that's just not a part of his game. He's a good defender when it comes to guarding a guard, but any position other than a guard, he really labors on that end, and he's talked about how he's uncomfortable doing that. So when you're not hitting your shots and that's the result on the other end, it's really tough. But they overcame that. They overcame the 0 for 9 from Wiggins. They overcame not having Caruso, overcame not having J-Dub. It was all about going through these battle scars, these wars. And I know it didn't happen in April, so it doesn't count, but they still went through adversity together throughout this entire season to get to this point.
March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. Got to have your eye on a couple underdogs this year, and FanDuel makes it easy to back them with spreads, totals, and game props. With tournament games happening almost every day, there's always something exciting to bet on. The FanDuel app is simple to use, and when I win, I get paid instantly. No waiting around. And with conference tournament season in full swing, you could turn that $5 into $200 in bonus bets tonight. The quarterfinal of the Big 12 tournament features Texas Tech and Baylor. Baylor needs to build their resume, but they're underdogs here. FanDuel has Texas Tech laying 5.5. Visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoop action all tournament long.
The Chargers have finally brought in a weapon for Justin Herbert, and it's a familiar name because it's Mike Williams.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Drogemeyer, and we've been covering the Chargers now for 9 seasons together, but this is our 7th year as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you to the everydayers out there for making us your first listen today. To make sure that you never miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from. David, what do we got today?
Well, Daniel, ever since the legal tampering period began, Charger fans have been begging for an offensive weapon and some help on the offensive line. And, well, they have something now with the return of whole lotta Mike Williams. So it's good to have Mike Williams back. It's definitely not enough to make everyone feel good about where the offense is, but I would say it is definitely something that makes you feel a little bit better on what's going on. And then defensively, they add another corner, a guy that has the big size that you look for from that position, who's 6'3", 220, like a real prototypical type of corner who definitely excels more in zone coverage than man-to-man. And they're bringing back that same old linebacker room with Denzel Perryman and Troy Dye being re-signed by the Chargers.
And there's a lot of rooms on the Chargers roster where I would not be fine with them running it back with the same dudes, but the linebacker core was not one of them, because if you brought all those dudes back with the way Navarro Bowman had those dudes coached up, I'm fully on board with it. But let's talk about the Chargers finally adding a weapon and someone that we brought up as an emergency option for the Chargers. I mean, it's sad to get to an emergency option on day 3 of free agency, but I do think it shouldn't damper how people feel just about this move in isolation. And I think that that's the important part of this conversation, is not to look at Mike Williams and compare him to what you could have had. It's to look at Mike Williams as far as what he brings to the table and what the Chargers don't have. And that is an ex-receiver that can win on the boundary outside the numbers and do a couple of things for you that you couldn't consistently do. And that is make those connections down the field for big chunk plays, where the Chargers tried many times last year and failed to convert way too many of them. And another part of it is someone who can make those contested catches, the calling card of Mike Williams, who even in a down year last year, because it was a down year, and this is definitely a move for him to try to recoup some of that value with the chemistry that he has with Justin Herbert, still just a fiend with contested catch situations. Like, it's insane that out of, him only having 21 catches, 7 of those catches were contested catches. He got 70% of his contested catch targets last season. He's still that dude, and he brings both of those things to the table, which aren't fixing this room or probably adding enough to it to feel great about where this offense is and how much it's improved since last year. But he does bring a couple of things to the table that you just frankly don't have.
Yeah, and I think what one of those things is it allows you to utilize your pieces in the way, in the manner in which they should be utilized, to emphasize their strengths and really minimize what they don't do well. Obviously, what I'm talking about here is sending Quentin Johnston deep down the field on those go balls and those, contested catches. That's not what he does. That's not his game. He should be catching those crossers, those drag routes, those yards after catch type of plays. And now when you bring in Mike Williams, you have somebody that can win on the outside, that can go up and get it, and has proven it. Not only was it 70% contested catch this season, it was 70% the previous season as well. In the few games that he was out there before he tore his ACL, he was on a torrid pace. It was 19 catches, 249 yards, and a touchdown in 3 games. Like, he was absolutely cooking, and he was in line for a big season. And unfortunately, the torn ACL took that all away. But also, this is a second year removed from that ACL. Hopefully that means he gets healthier. He gets to work with Ben Herbert. Hopefully he gets some strength back there. Obviously, you know what Mike Williams does. He goes up and makes those spectacular catches, but they are not great on that man's body because he's going up and getting it, and he's fallen quite a distance to the ground. Yeah. But I think this is also going to take some attention away from Ladd McConkey, which is going to make him a lot more effective. You can't just focus all in on Ladd. You got to pay attention and respect what Mike Williams can do on the outside.
And I think it's just nice to have someone that if nothing is open, you can still throw it to him. Right?
Yeah.
And that's what Mike Williams brings to the table, and something I just don't think you had necessarily spades of in that receiver room last year, and someone that doesn't need to be open to catch the football. And I think as far as the injuries go, the good thing is he played 18 games last season. Yeah. I know you might be thinking, okay, well, there's only a 17-game season. I know. He got traded, and because of how the bye weeks were laid out, he ended up playing 9 games with the Steelers and also 9 games with the Jets, and did look to be a little bit more like himself in his game with the Steelers. Had a couple, all the catches and highlights you saw were just like, that's classic Mike Williams.
Yeah.
Like, he still was making those big plays, even in a 21 catch season. But the last time we saw him with the Chargers in 2023, it was 19 catches for 249 yards before he got hurt in week 3. He was on pace for, a season where he put up 1,400 yards and 107 catches before he got hurt that year. So that was the last time we saw him with the Chargers. Obviously, he didn't work out for the Jets or the Steelers. I think the other big part of this that makes you feel better about at least the last injury that he occurred or sustained, he has had a whole year since, he's had a full playing year to kind of get back up to speed. And he's a 30-plus-year-old receiver, so you don't know if he'll all the way get back to what he was pre-ACL tear. But I do think you have a guy that's not just coming off of it and trying to work his way back into game shape, work his way into trusting that knee again. He's had a full season to kind of work out the kinks, you would hope to, in that situation. But I do think that the trio of Mike Williams, Ladd McConkey, and Quentin Johnston might be less talented without Josh Palmer at his age, right, and what he was. But I do think it's a better fit because I think all 3 of those guys bring very different things to the table. And now you have a dude who can win those outside matchups as well. And if you thought their Chargers were done signing receivers, you were wrong, because they also brought back Jalen Reagor, who was on our go when we did our stay or go on offense. Just because, even though he had some moments, it didn't feel like it would be a priority for the Chargers to bring him back. And they do end up getting him back on, what's likely to be a very cheap deal, or what is a cheap deal. Not going to make anyone feel much better, though, about just the talent overall in the wide receiver room.
Yeah, he just wasn't on the field very much. And I think one of the things that you think about when you think about Jalen Reagor is one of the first big opportunities he had to make an impact on a game. He dropped the ball and it basically caused
Fumbled
a fumble.
It through the end zone.
Yeah, and it was just a horrible play that could have changed the trajectory of that game that they ended up losing to the Arizona Cardinals. So I think for Jalen Reagor, they must see something they like from him. I saw one pretty fantastic catch where he went up and got the football
sideline
right
catch,
sideline.
I believe, against the Saints.
Yeah, that was a great play, but I don't know if I saw enough to be able to say, hey, this is a guy I absolutely have to have in my wide receiver room. And hey, obviously this comes with some context. This isn't a wide receiver 4. I think this is probably a wide receiver 5 or 6, probably. And still, even with the multi-year extension that he apparently has signed, I think it's still a guy who is going to have to fight for his roster spot. I don't think that the contract or the money is going to tie him or guarantee his spot, because I just don't think we've seen enough to say, yeah, that's somebody that we absolutely have to have in the room.
Yeah, the thing is, I don't think he played bad, but, it was 8 games, 7 catches for 100 yards, 14.3 yards per catch, which is nice. Obviously, he had the big play down the sideline against the Saints. He had the big play against the Arizona Cardinals, where obviously he ends up fumbling it. It's just interesting to have the strategy of hoarding TCU wide receivers, because now 3 of the 6 you have on your team right now are all from TCU.
That's
with Darius
true.
Davis and Quentin Johnston. Not wide receiver you by any means, TCU, but I think the big thing here is just these in a vacuum, if they're complementary moves, I think are fine. But neither of them move the needle for this offense. It still feels like they still have to spend a premium pick at wide receiver. At least now, if you don't get that big physical outside X receiver, you don't feel like you have to take that in the draft, or it has to be a first-round pick that can do that specific thing. That's what's nice about having Mike Williams, but it still feels like you're going to have to spend a high pick on a wide receiver. But that's what it comes down to again. And it's still day 3, but a lot of the options are falling off the board. How many positions do you realistically think you can spend a big time draft pick on? Because it feels like on day 1 and 2, your rounds 1 through 3 picks, you need a wide receiver, you need a tight end, you need defensive line, you probably need multiple different interior offensive linemen, and that's not even including potentially getting the heir apparent for Khalil Mack, who just signed a 1-year deal. How many can you use a premium pick on? Not all of them, right? And it feels like there's still too many holes left on this roster for where we're at.
The Jets move on from 2 of their biggest name veterans.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast.
2 of the biggest names on the roster who were officially released on Wednesday, though they are Aaron Rodgers and CJ Mosley. And nobody should be surprised by this. The Jets announced that they were going to cut Rodgers weeks ago. So this was really just a bookkeeping thing that they kept him on the roster till Wednesday. And the writing was on the wall for Mosley since the team signed Jamie and Sherwood to an extension or to a new contract before the start of the legal tampering period. But these moves were essential. I think, first of all, there's a lot of symbolism, but there are also tangible reasons the Jets moved on from these players. When you talk about symbolism, there's a lot there with Aaron Rodgers. There was a suggestion out there from some quarters of the fan base the Jets should bring him back and make him essentially the stopgap quarterback, the bridge quarterback to the future. But it's very difficult to do that with a player with Aaron Rodgers' track record, because Aaron Rodgers has become accustomed to being the face of whatever franchise he's on. He was the face of the Green Bay Packers for pretty much his entire time there as the starting quarterback from 2008 on, after the Packers moved on from Brett Favre. And I don't need to tell you, if you're a Jets fan, how much he's been at the center of the team's plans over the last 2 seasons. I mean, the Jets pretty much did everything he wanted. When you talk about the coaches they hired on the offensive side of the ball, when you talk about the receivers they brought in, Randall Cobb, Alan Lazard, Devontae Adams. And I think it would have been very difficult to bring Rodgers back in a situation where he's not familiar with the play caller. They're not running his preferred system. Do you bring back Devontae Adams at an inordinately large cap number? Would you bring back Alan Lazard, who for some reason still remains on the team? It would have been very difficult to do. And beyond that, Rodgers would have cost you another $37.5 million, which would have led to a dead money hit of $63 million next year. So it was a total non-starter. It was a move the Jets had to make. And obviously the Jets signed their new quarterback on Monday, Justin Fields. So there are implications for moving on from Rodgers. So I think the reason the Jets waited until Wednesday is that if you wait until the start of the new league year, you can designate a player a post-June 1st cut. So there are financial ramifications of that. And by all indications, the Jets will declare Rodgers a post-June 1st cut. And what that means is that his $23.5 million cap hit, that's what the number would have been if he was on the team. It will remain that until June 1st. So the Jets don't take on any additional dead money in the near term. And that's important, because if the Jets just made Rodgers a regular cut, his cap number would rise from $23.5 million to $49 million. So the Jets would need to find an extra $25.5 million in cap space. That's about half the cap space they entered the offseason with, which I think is the reason they're designating him a post-June 1st cut. Now, if it was me, I may just take the medicine and move on from him. But I understand why the Jets didn't do it, because we really would have limited what the Jets could do this offseason if they did not make him a post-June 1st cut. Now, the catch to this is on June 1st, his cap number actually goes down. It actually goes down from $23.5 million to $14 million. So you get close to another $10 million. But of course, there's another catch, is by designating him a post-June 1st cut, when his cap number goes down on June 1st, that triggers a $34 million dead money hit for 2026. So you take less money now, you push more to the future. And by all indications, that's the same thing that's going to happen with Mosley. The Jets released him on Wednesday, and they make him a post-June 1st cap hit. So essentially, what happens with Mosley is similar to Rodgers. At the moment, his cap number remains the same until June 1st. And again, his number would have gone up. So right now his number is $12.7 million. That's what it would have been if he was on the team. It remains $12.7 million until June 1st. Then it drops to $8.7 million. So the Jets get another extra $4 million in cap space on June 1st. The catch is that this pushes $7.7 million of dead money to 2026. Now, when we talk about moving on from CJ Mosley, the writing was kind of on the wall. Now, CJ Mosley is a quality player. By all accounts, a great leader. I think he's been voted captain every year he's with the team. A guy who, by all accounts, a very important player on the defense. He's been the quarterback of the defense, making sure everyone gets lined up correctly for his entire time with the team, and he's quite good in that role. Look, I've been a longtime critic of the contract the Jets gave him in 2019 because for all the good that Mosley does, they still, I think, paid him too much money. But that's not a day. It's not a day to discuss this. I think it's a day to be appreciative of a guy who gave the Jets quality service through the years. And it was funny because the Mosley era started off really well for like 3/4 of his first game, where he was dominating the Buffalo Bills in Week 1, 2019. And then he suffered an injury, which essentially finished him for the year. He only played one game after that. Then 2020, he opted out because of COVID. So it really wasn't until year 3 where he started playing for the Jets. Was named team MVP in 2021, made a Pro Bowl and a second team All-Pro in 2022. And then 2023, I thought he had I think it's kind of funny because I thought in 2023, he deserved the Pro Bowl and second team All-Pro. I'm not sure he deserved it in 2022, even though I think he was decent. So these things kind of balance out. But this past year, he dealt with a lot of injuries. And Jamie Sherwood stepped into his role. And Jamie Sherwood excelled. And I have to say, I thought the Jets were going to bring back Mosley for another year. I thought they were going to kind of use him as a transitional player, a veteran leader who could kind of like help them with the new system, help mentor some younger guys. And while I understand the argument for that, I don't think that was the best thing for the Jets. I think the best thing for the Jets is this young player who emerged, Jamie Sherwood, is a guy you keep around and you build around him, because sometimes these painful decisions need to be made in the NFL. Sometimes a guy's a good player, but he just gets old. And you want to have a younger player, a homegrown young player, be able to step in and replace him. And I'm pleasantly surprised that this is the direction the Jets went in. I mean, it's difficult to move on from a guy like CJ Mosley, who's a very classy professional. I mean, I actually interviewed CJ Mosley on this podcast about 5 years ago. And I'll tell you straight up, he was probably my favorite interview ever. A great guy, really, really personable, just a genuinely nice person. But the NFL is a tough business. And, CJ Mosley's had an excellent career. He did good things with the Jets, but sometimes it's time to move on. And he's 33 years of age. Now, look, the Jets, in addition to giving him a contract that was worth too much in 2019, that was Mike McCagnon, Joe Douglas restructured this deal an awful lot. Whenever the Jets needed cap space in the offseason, the Mosley contract would get restructured, which pushed a lot of money to this year. Because, I gave you the numbers. I mean, Mosley's not going to be with the team anymore. He's still going to cost the Jets $16 million over the next 2 seasons or so. It's a tough spot, but it's a necessary move to turn the page, because he's 33 years old. Last year it's not that it wasn't good. It's that he just could not stay on the field. And when a linebacker at 33 has trouble staying on the field, it's a clear sign that his body might be breaking down. Now, could there be a resurgence somewhere if he signs with a contender that needs a run-stopping linebacker? Perhaps. And look, I'll be rooting for him. I thought he was a really classy guy when he's with the Jets and did some good things on the field for this team. And everybody loves him in the locker room. Everybody has a lot of respect for him. Maybe there is a team he can go out there and help. I mean, I'll be rooting for him at his next stop, but it was time to turn the page. With Rodgers, there's symbolism in turning the page, just turning a page on from an era that did not work. With Mosley, there's symbolism in moving to the next generation of Jets. Sometimes it's just time for an older guy to move to pass the torch to a guy he mentored, and that's what CJ Mosley did with Jamie Sherwood. And I'm sure Mosley was very helpful for Sherwood. I'm sure Sherwood would be the first to tell you that Mosley was a critical guy for his development, and it's just time now. And I'm happy they're doing it, because I thought the Jets were going to stick with Mosley and let Sherwood walk. Jets now have a new era at the linebacker position.
March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories, and even who's cutting down the nets. Got to have your eye on a couple underdogs this year, and FanDuel makes it easy to back them with spreads, totals, and game props. With tournament games happening almost every day, there's always something exciting to bet on. The FanDuel app is simple to use, and when I win, I get paid instantly. No waiting around. And with conference tournament season in full swing, you could turn that $5 into $200 in bonus bets tonight. The quarterfinal of the Big 12 tournament features Texas Tech and Baylor. Baylor needs to build their resume, but they're underdogs here. FanDuel has Texas Tech laying 5.5. Visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoop action all tournament long.
Texas survives and advances in the SEC tournament.
You are Locked On Longhorns, your daily podcast on the Texas Longhorns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
The Texas Longhorns held off Vanderbilt 79-72 in the first round of the SEC Tournament in Nashville. The Longhorns were in control for most of this game. Texas was up by 15 at halftime. They pushed the lead up to 18 at one point early on in the second half. The Longhorns really dominated most of this game. They were up double digits for more than 20 minutes of today's contest in Nashville. It's a quadrant one victory for the Longhorns, and boy, did they need it. A loss today would have all but ended Texas's season and maybe would have all but ended Rodney Terry's tenure as the head coach for the Texas men's team. But instead, they live to play another day, and the Horns will get another chance to play Texas A&M. The rubber match as the two teams split in the regular season, but a huge, huge victory for the Longhorns. And it has me, and I think it has a lot of Texas fans wondering, where was that? Why didn't we see that in the 18-game regular season SEC schedule? Why did it take until this true must-win game to see that type of energy level, that type of effort, that type of desperation for this Texas team? We didn't see that against Oklahoma on Saturday. We didn't see that against Georgia the previous Saturday. We didn't see that from Arkansas. I mean, we really didn't see any of that in February and March. And finally, it shows up. Now, better late than never, I guess, but it might be too little, too late for the Horns. But at least they gave you some belief, and at least they kept their slim tournament hopes alive. There's a gnat flying around, and it is absolutely killing me right now. But they found a way to get it done. But again, watching that game, especially watching that first half where Texas was in total control, just wondering, why did we not see more of that during the regular season? Look, it was 40 minutes of damn near dominance. I mean, Texas was in control. I know things got a little tougher than any of us wanted down the stretch. Vandy cut it to 7 with about a minute and a half to go. Texas was playing stupid. They were fouling way too much, which that's the one thing you can't do when you're playing with a lead late in the game. You cannot stop the clock and give the other team free points. Texas did that, which allowed the Commodores to get back into the game. And Texas also missed a couple of free throws as well to keep the door slightly ajar for Vandy. But there was never, and I don't know about y'all, but there was never a moment in that game where I thought Texas was going to lose. It's pretty funny. The warm-ups that the Texas players wear on the bench say nothing easy. And that feels very appropriate for this Texas team because nothing has been easy for them, and they really didn't make this one as easy as it could have been. But again, there was never really a moment where I thought Texas was going to lose today. They just did too much right on both ends of the floor to keep Vanderbilt at bay. And yeah, it got to 7, but again, it never got to within 2 possessions, so I felt good about Texas there. By the way, if you're watching this live, comment in the live chat. Texas Rocks is here, says, not good news. We don't need Terry saving his job. Well, Texas Rocks, if you want a change to be made atop the Texas men's basketball program, I've got good news. The Longhorns haven't done anything yet. All this win does is gives them another opportunity to win another game tomorrow. And look, if they do that, that might be enough to get them into the dance. I don't know if it will be. They still might have to beat Tennessee in the third round of the SEC tournament. But even then, I'm not sure that's enough. Part of me thinks that RT's fate is already sealed and the hay is already in the barn. And I know Chris Del Conte has had some conversations behind the scenes about who could be Rodney Terry's replacement. So, look, I don't think you're alone. I think there are a few Longhorn fans out there that are rooting against Texas right now just to make sure that the Horns make a coaching change once this season comes to an end. If you are one of those fans, then again, I think you're still safe. Like if Texas goes out there and loses to A&M tomorrow, the Horns aren't making the tournament. And I think that means Rodney Terry isn't going to be allowed to continue coaching here. Now, if you're still here, Texas Rocks, I'll ask you, you're going to be rooting against Texas A&M tomorrow? I guess it's one thing to root against Texas against a team like Vanderbilt, but the Aggies, your biggest rival, you want to lose to them? I know long-term you might think it's better, but I can't think of too many instances. Really, I can't think of one instance in my life where I've ever rooted for Texas A&M. I really don't think I've ever rooted for Texas A&M to beat Texas in any sport at any moment. So I do wonder if the portion of Longhorn fans who want change, again, are going to be rooting against Texas, against A&M tomorrow. But they found a way to get it done. And you wonder if Tournament Terry is a thing. Remember, RT won the Big 12 tournament in 2023. Of course, Texas made the deep run to the Elite Eight that season. Rodney Terry won a tournament game last year, so it's 4 tournament wins in 2 seasons. He's 1 win away from getting Texas back to their 3rd straight tournament. The last Longhorn coach to make it to 3 straight NCAA tournaments was Rick Barnes from 2010 to 2012. So it's been more than a decade that a Texas coach has been able to go to 3 straight big dances. Again, job's not finished. Texas ain't there yet, but a win tomorrow might get the Longhorns there. And Rodney Terry, both at Texas and at his previous stops as a head coach, has a reputation of having his teams play their best basketball at the end of the season. Didn't see it in February at the end of the regular season, but maybe we're going to see it in Nashville. Desperation's a hell of a drug, y'all. Vanderbilt was already in. Talked about this a little bit on this morning show. Vanderbilt was already in the dance. They didn't need this game today. Texas needed this game today. It's going to be a similar situation tomorrow. A&M's already in. I mean, they're playing for seeding right now, but a quick look at the bracket matrix, I'm seeing the Aggies as a 3 seed. So they are already in the NCAA tournament. Their fate is sealed. They know they're going to be dancing. Texas still needs to win another game to get in. So you wonder if that desperation that we saw from the Longhorns today, playing against a team that doesn't have nearly as much on the line, is going to carry over to tomorrow's game. I'm not saying Vanderbilt didn't try. They didn't rest their players or, go easy on Texas or anything like that. But again, it's just human nature at times that kicks in. When one team is desperate and they're playing for a lot more than the other team, sometimes you see the energy and effort levels match that. When Texas played Vandy in the regular season, they weren't hustling the way that they hustled today. They weren't crashing the boards the way they were today. They weren't diving on the floor for loose balls. They weren't winning those 50-50 battles. They weren't doing any of those things. But today, in a game that mattered more for one team, that one team showed up. Really impressed with the Texas defense today. I mean, Vanderbilt averaged 80 points per game coming in. They had 26 in the first half. That's the fewest points they've scored in any first half all season long. They didn't even get to 20 until there were like 2 minutes and 20 seconds left in the first half. I mean, Texas was making Vandy work for everything on the offensive end of the floor. And again, going back to that regular season matchup, I keep saying in Nashville. Obviously, both games were in Nashville, but on Vandy's campus, Vandy had 17 offensive rebounds in that Texas loss. Texas was plus 10 on the boards through the first 20 minutes when they built that 15-point lead. They didn't give Vandy second chance opportunities. They didn't give them anything easy. Texas did a great job on the low block as well. The Longhorns were dominant in the low post, which is the exact opposite of what happened in the first game. I mean, Jalen Carey got whatever he wanted in the regular season matchup. He was a non-factor today. Arthur Kaluma did a great job on the low block. Caden Shedrick did a great job on the low block. Texas wasn't giving up those easy baskets. They weren't giving up those second chance opportunities that absolutely destroyed them the first time they played the Commies. I don't know if I could say Commies. I feel like that's a bad abbreviation for Commodores. I don't know if they're going to like that one too much. But Vandy couldn't get out and run. Texas wasn't turning the ball over on offense, so the Longhorns were able to set their defense. They kept everything in front of them. You heard Jay Billis talking about that a ton on the telecast. That was the difference in the game. And we'll get to, Trey Johnson. We'll get to Jordan Pope. We'll get to Arthur Kaluma. We'll get to the guys who really showed up in the box score in a moment. I got to give some love to Kendall Weaver, who ended the game with 0 points today. Not often am I going to give shout-outs to guys who don't score. Kendall Weaver was 0 for 2, but he was really impactful in his 18 minutes. He was terrible against Oklahoma on Saturday, understandably so. His first game back after missing 15 straight with that hip flexor injury. He looked a little lost, and he looked a little slow against the Sooners. I wasn't sure what to expect from Kendall Weaver today. I didn't know if he was going to play, but he made a difference in that first half, especially the defense, the rebounding. I think he ended up with, 6 rebounds, also 2 assists, a steal, and a block in those 18 minutes. So despite not putting up a singular point, Kendall Weaver made a difference. And look, I'm not going to sit here and act like Texas would be a 3 seed in the NCAA tournament if they had Kendall Weaver all year. but I think Kendall Weaver could have been the difference in one or two of the close losses that the Longhorns had in the regular season. Having him back right now, again, maybe too little too late, but it's better late than never. He made a difference in that first half, and if he can give that type of performance off the bench tomorrow against Texas A&M, be that spark plug that he was at the end of last season in the NCAA tournament, then that's going to help Texas's chances to pull off the upset against the Aggies tomorrow afternoon. So a definite shout out to Kendall Weaver for what he was able to do. All right, plenty more on this game. Big bounce back from Trey Johnson. And God, it was great to see the supporting cast show up. You can't win. As good as Trey Johnson is, SEC Freshman of the Year, the leading scorer in this conference, you need more than just one guy to show up if you are going to beat good teams in the month of March. Texas got a ton of big-time performances.
March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's 200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. Got to have your eye on a couple underdogs this year, and FanDuel makes it easy to back them with spreads, totals, and game props. With tournament games happening almost every day, there's always something exciting to bet on. The FanDuel app is simple to use, and when I win, I get paid instantly. No waiting around. And with conference tournament season in full swing, you could turn that $5 into $200 in bonus bets tonight. The quarterfinal of the Big 12 tournament features Texas Tech and Baylor. Baylor needs to build their resume, but they're underdogs here. FanDuel has Texas Tech laying 5.5. Visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoop action all tournament long.
All of a sudden, it's the much maligned Carolina front court that's leading the way.
You are Locked On Tar Heels, your daily podcast on the UNC Tar Heels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Here's where we got to start this conversation coming out of the Notre Dame game. Which, by the way, thankfully, Carolina didn't need an Elliot Cadeau miracle 4-point play to win it this time around like they did back in January. But it is the Carolina front court that has received its lumps. Its fair share of lumps. Its fair share of this front court's not good, but can they just be around and set screens and let the backcourt cook? Well, Pat Kilby. In this game, Jalen Withers goes for a career-high 21 points on 7 of 10 shooting, 9 boards, 1 assist, 0 turnovers, 2 blocks, 2 steals. Then Allen Lubin gets his second double-double in the last 3 games, 17 points on 8 of 13 shooting. This is how you know you're having a year. That 8 of 13 brought his field goal percentage down. 10 rebounds, 5 of them were offensive, an assist, 2 blocks, and a steal. I believe he actually had 2 assists was credited to him after the fact. Pat Kilby. What happens when this Carolina team that is led by its backcourt suddenly has this front court in Jay Witt and Van Allen Lubin that's figured it out, man? What does that mean for this team?
Well, it definitely changes the ceiling for this team. I mean, it's like you said, there's been a lot of criticism towards that front court all year long. And a lot of it has been justified. And to this point, they've struggled. But here lately, they've been playing really well. Obviously, we saw that today. When Jalen Withers, he kind of, in a way, adds a Brady Manic dynamic the way he's been stretching the floor. And obviously today was a different story. But really, I mean, he's been shooting it well for the last 7 or 8 games, I would say. Would you agree with that?
100%.
Yeah.
I think he was a little less effective in the Duke game, but much more in the winning streak and surrounding it. In fact, Pac, his 7 made threes is 1 shy from the all-time Carolina single game record for made threes, which is 8, which a bunch of dudes do. Shad McCants, Ray Felton, Shammond Williams, Jeff McInnes, Dante Calabria, and Coach Davis himself all had 8 threes in a game. Jalen Withers was 1 shy of tying that group, Pack. It's absolutely crazy. It's the most threes a Tar Heel has ever made in the ACC tournament.
Yeah, it's remarkable what he did today. But man, he provides a boost. He stretches the floor when he's shooting the ball like that. And I thought Notre Dame was really kind of letting him get great shots.
That's the point.
his feet were set. Not a lot of them were contested. He was in rhythm, and he was knocking them down. And just that right there in itself, proving that he can do that, is going to change the way that teams have to guard him.
Yep.
And that's going to open.
Go ahead. Yep, exactly. Go. Say what you're saying.
It opens it up so much more for Elliott, Ian, RJ, Seth, you name it.
And Venn inside.
Yeah, and Venn. It frees up that post because those guys have to guard the perimeter more. And Venn, like we saw today, he's a beneficiary of that. Amongst other things, I thought our ball movement was really good today. We were really sharing the basketball. We were getting paint touches, spraying it around. And Van Allen Lubin was kind of the recipient of some of those help up, dump offs. He slams it home or lays it in. Like, he did a good job with that. And so, but a lot of that is credit to Withers and some of the other guys for stretching the floor the way they've been shooting the ball. And so when we're doing that and they're contributing in those ways, man, it changes the dynamic of our team. One of the things I thought of today when I was watching the game, in the preseason, John Rothstein, he went and watched Carolina practice, and he said, if the bigs can contribute 12 points and 12 rebounds per game, then Carolina is going to be formidable. Do you remember this?
I do. Absolutely.
And we were like, 12 points and 12 rebounds. What are you talking about, dude? Like, they'll get that easy. It turns out maybe some nights they haven't. But the point is, they're over exceeding that now. And it turns out that there may be some truth to that. When those guys are contributing in that way, when they're combining for 38 points, I mean, that's going to make us really tough to beat. But even if they just can combine for 20 points and double-digit rebounds with our guard play, I think we're going to be okay. And they seem to have found some consistency in that here in the last few games.
Yeah, I mean, just those two alone, not even thinking of Jay Wash, 38 points and 19 rebounds for Van Allen Lubin, Pack, just as we all expected. He's the most impactful transfer that Carolina has this year, right? Like, we all saw that coming in. We all called it. No, bad, terrible call on Mr. Isaac Shea. But Pack, Van Allen gets a double-double, his second of the season. And listen to this. They've both come in the last 3 games. The Virginia Tech game was the other one. 7th straight double-figure scoring game for Van Allen Lubin. That's the longest streak of his career. And he was get this. I know we always say plus minus is not the end all be all. There's only so much it can do for you. But Van Allen was a game high plus 28 in plus minus in this thing. This dude has, he's just found his niche, his niche. I should be less highfalutin, his niche. And everyone else has found it around him, and they're just doing it. I love, Pack, would you talk about, because obviously I noticed it and I talked about it some, but I would love your coaching eyes on this. Notre Dame was so willing to switch everything 1 through 5, and it just let Carolina get simple post looks for Van Allen Lubin, and he finished to the tune of 17 points, 2 off his Carolina career high.
Yeah, well, and it's hard to blame Notre Dame because I've had similar thoughts. A lot of people watch Carolina and they don't think Carolina has enough of a post threat to be concerned with switching. And I think a lot of people look at it and think they don't think Carolina is going to throw in there this year. And we haven't thrown it in there a lot. I mean, if you really think about it, how many times have we just thrown it in for a post up? I mean, not nearly as much as we did when number 5 was down there. So that, I think Notre Dame was not necessarily crazy for thinking of switching everything. Yeah. Now, they should have adjusted.
That's the point. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and they never did. And so that's where I think they went wrong. But I don't think they're wrong for trying it, because I probably would have done the same. Because where it gets scary is if you don't switch and you get hung up on a screen or whatever, and then all of a sudden our guards are getting downhill. We're really good when we're doing that, but we did a good job. We did a good job of taking advantage of, taking advantage of the switches today, and I think that paid dividends for us.
And what else does that allow when the interior is being strong? The 3-point shooting. It was down in the Duke game, but Carolina reset so well. Pack, they went bonkers in this game from 3, 13 of 28. The season average, you know how we've been looking at what was the season average before the winning streak and what is it now? I've been looking at that. It was 32.3% before the winning streak started. Pack, right now, it is 35.7%. So in 8 games, it's gone up 3.4%. And the Tar Heels as a team are now 72nd in the nation in 3-point shooting. Catch this. I didn't realize this until I was looking when I was updating my stats post-game. RJ has made at least 3 threes in each of the last 5 games, Pack. 5 straight games or 3 or more threes for RJ, who, by the way, is now shooting a career high for single season free throw percentage. This dude that was already Carolina's leader in free throw percentage is now shooting the best percentage of his career. It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, and he's been, I mean, the stats just backed it up, but he's looked so much more like RJ since we've been on this win streak, or this really good streak of good basketball.
7 out of 8 wins. Right. Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. He's looked a lot more like the RJ we expected him to look like. And I think, we all know when RJ is good, Carolina is good, right? He makes us tick. He is our guy, and he's been playing really well here lately.
In fact, I want to go back to something you said that we moved off of and didn't come back to. You talked about how well Carolina moved the ball, 19 assists on 28 field goals. And when you contrast that with what happened Saturday, Carolina moved it well at times, but only 8 total assists. And Duke when they decided Carolina was done, it was over. That defense shut everything off, and Carolina's offense looked completely stagnant. In this game, they moved the ball so much better than that. It was not as electric as it was in the winning streak. Like Carolina didn't get to 80 points like they did in every game of that winning streak, but they got 76. They didn't get to 1.3 points per possession like they did in every game of that winning streak, but they got to 1.226, Pack, which is plenty of enough against a Notre Dame team that is very slow paced, right? And so that was a big critical thing that I thought was really good. What did you think about the offense in totality? I just wanted to hear more about what you were thinking about how well they moved the ball, including that possession. Let me say really quick, sorry. That possession where they moved it like 9 times, bunch of pump fakes, wound up with a Van Allen Lubin dunk in the first half there, man. It was just a thing of beauty.
Yeah, that possession stands out the most to me of any in this game. But there were multiple possessions where I thought the ball just moved really well. And a saying I always use with our teams that I thought Carolina did a good job of today: pass up a good shot to get a great one. Pass up a good shot to get a better one. And I thought Carolina did that. I thought there were times we could have shot the ball. And there were still a few possessions where I thought we could have gotten a better look. But for the most part, I thought we gave up good shots to get better ones. And I thought, and I know we'll get into more of this in the second segment, but I thought our defense was good, and that sparked our offense. And the same can be said the other way. Because shots were going in and we were getting after it, it was easier for us to guard. And there's a strong correlation there between those two. But I thought the team did a really good job of sharing the basketball and making sure we got good looks.
March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. Got to have your eye on a couple underdogs this year, and FanDuel makes it easy to back them with spreads, totals, and game props. With tournament games happening almost every day, there's always something exciting to bet on. The FanDuel app is simple to use, and when I win, I get paid instantly. No waiting around. And with conference tournament season in full swing, you could turn that $5 into $200 in bonus bets tonight. The quarterfinal of the Big 12 tournament features Texas Tech and Baylor. Baylor needs to build their resume, but they're underdogs here. FanDuel has Texas Tech laying 5.5. Visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoop action all tournament long.
Dominant 20-point Minnesota Timberwolves win over the Nuggets.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast.
The Wolves, of course, came into this game with a 2-0 season series lead over Denver. Having not played since late January, the Wolves had already guaranteed at least a split in the season series. And both games had come at Target Center. Remember, the last time the Wolves were in Denver was Game 7 of the second round last season, when the Wolves had that massive second half comeback. Coming into this game, the Wolves, of course, now healthy. The Nuggets missing Aaron Gordon, who's doubtful coming in with the calf injury he suffered on Sunday. It's the second straight game he's missed. And the Wolves jumped on Denver early in this one. They really did. Also I should like to further set the stage. The Wolves were in the seventh place in the Western Conference. Golden State had already won, which they just keep doing. And the Wolves needed to win to keep pace. They're in a virtual tie for 6 in the West, but they're a game back in the loss column to the Warriors. So they really needed to win to keep pace there and to stay a game and a half up on LA, the Clippers, who also won on Wednesday night. So an important game for Minnesota, to say the least. And by the way, I know there's only like 16 games left. They're now only 4.5 games behind Denver for the 3 spot in the West, and they have the tiebreaker over the Nuggets. Think about that. They're only 4 games out of the 4 spot, and the Lakers, who have now lost 2 games in a row. So there's a lot still in front of Minnesota. This game was very important to keep the good vibes rolling, going into another softer spot in the schedule, a 5-game homestand upcoming. And the Wolves came out like they knew just that. They came out, jumped out to an 8-2 lead, I think it was, ultimately winning the first quarter by 8 points. The swarming defense, actually, the first quarter is probably the Wolves' worst defensive quarter overall, but there was still a lot of activity. And it was really just they missed shots early on offense. It was actually they scored the most points in the first quarter of any quarter in the game, the Wolves did. But the offense early on was a little bit disjointed. But then as things rolled through in the first quarter, and Nas got on the floor and Dante DiVincenzo got on the floor, Dante hit a couple of threes. The Wolves defense just kept, like Russell Westbrook had a couple of Russell Westbrook plays, like in a good way for Denver early in this game that kind of kept them hanging around. Jokic scored a little bit early. But the Wolves did a really good job at making Nikola Jokic work to get anything he got, and they limited passing lanes for him. And the old make Joker score, like that doesn't always work. The dude's really, really good, turns out. And yeah, he had 34 points. But you'd rather him be focused on scoring than easily dishing to teammates. And he finished with just 4 assists and 3 turnovers. The Wolves did, as I thought they would, and I noted this on Wednesday's show, is they tried to guard him with Rudy Gobert one-on-one. Outside of a foul on like the Nuggets, 3rd or 4th possession of the game, a shooting foul that Gobert committed on Jokic, and then Jokic subsequently missed both free throws. I thought he did great. He altered a bunch of shots. He blocked at least one Jokic shot in this game. I guess he was only credited with 1 block, and that was on a Jokic attempt. He made Jokic shoot over him and was physical enough with him. On the flip side, when Jokic tried to guard Julius Randle was not deterred by Joker's size. He just went right into his chest and got a couple of foul calls, yes, but it was more the idea of I'm just going to keep going through this brick wall, and it's good. There's going to be some give to it, and I'm not going to back down from this challenge. I'm going to create a shot for myself or for teammates, and we just keep seeing really strong play from Julius Randle. But I thought the mentality on both ends, from Gobert guarding Jokic on the defensive end and Randle going at Jokic on the offensive end, was very impressive. Now, Russell Westbrook guarded Randle for stretches early in the game. As the game wore on, though, it became, Westbrook was less of a factor, I thought, late in this game than he was early in the game. And the strategy had to shift a little bit with Denver down as much as they were. But the Wolves set the tone in the first kind of set of non-Jokic minutes. I think they were only like a +2 or something, but to at least win, they were they were better than that in the Jokic minutes, like with Jokic on the floor. So to at least extend the lead a little with Jokic off the floor, that's a pretty good step in the right direction to winning the game. I thought that as the game wore on, the defensive pressure ratcheted up for Minnesota to the point where it felt like at some point in the second and third quarter that this was, what was that, game 2 of the second round of the playoffs last year, and Nickeil Alexander-Walker just hounded Jamal Murray like crazy all the way up the floor. That was happening again. Jamal Murray had 0 made shots at halftime. He had 1 point at halftime. Jamal Murray finished this game with 12 points on 15 shots. He had 8 assists, no turnovers, fine. You can live with Joker scoring 34 and have only 4 assists plus 3 turnovers. And you can live with Murray having 8 assists and no turnovers. If you're holding the Joker to those 4 assists and you're holding Murray to 12 points on 15 shots and 1 of 5 on 3-point attempts, only 3 free throw attempts for Jamal Murray, a masterful job on defense for Minnesota. And Nickeil only played 16 minutes in this game, but I bet Jamal Murray felt like he was out there for every minute of it, every minute that Murray was on the floor. a really, really impressive defensive performance, not just from Nikhil. This was total swarming by the Wolves defense. And I was actually shocked when at the end of the game, I looked at the box score. The Wolves only had 7 steals and Denver had 9 steals. Minnesota only forced 10 Denver turnovers and Denver forced 15 Minnesota turnovers. That feels completely off. Like it kind of feels backwards. But the Wolves did score more points on those 10 Denver turnovers. In fact, they scored 19 points on 10 Nuggets turnovers. That's nearly 2 points a turnover, which is insane. Whereas Denver only scored 15 points off of 15 Minnesota turnovers. The Wolves had 17 fast break points in this game. They just advantageous. They did a good job defensively. And also, like 50-50 balls, they don't show up in the box score, as it turns out. They show up in some form or fashion as offensive rebounds or steals or whatever. But tip balls, deflections don't. I bet if we pulled deflections from this game, tracking data or whatever, the Wolves are going to have 3 times as many deflections as Denver. Active hands, multiple guys going to the ball. There were only a couple of first half possessions that were a bit dicey with the Wolves having some sloppy turnovers, kind of late second quarter, I should say, where the Wolves had a double-digit lead. It got down to 9 at halftime. There was just kind of a stretch there where it felt a little dicey with how careless the Wolves were with the ball, and Denver had some fast break opportunities themselves. The Nuggets actually got to within 5 points early in the third quarter, and then all of a sudden it was just an avalanche. The Timberwolves pushed back in a big way, and that's something we've seen them do over this winning streak that, we had not seen them do a lot, earlier this season. I mean, Christian Brown had a dunk just over 10 minutes remaining in the third quarter. Wolves were only up by 5. They call a timeout. They score right out of the timeout on a Julius Randle make. Then Ant hits a tough 3. And then Jaden McDaniels hits a pair of corner threes sandwiched around a Jamal Murray bucket, and the Wolves were up 10. They were leaving Jaden McDaniels open, and to that point, I think he had 1 basket midway through the third quarter, and then he just turned it on. They kept leaving him open, and Ant kept finding him. 2 consecutive Ant assists for Jaden McDaniels' corner threes. And then it was like the Wolves weren't really stopping Denver, but Denver was giving up wide open threes to Minnesota's players, and between Naz Reid and Ant and Jaden McDaniels, all of a sudden this lead was up to 14 very quickly. And by the end of the third quarter, Minnesota was still up by 14 points.